أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Welcome to learning from our history series of the Awakening Project of the Khoja Shia Ishnashri Muslim community. Awakening Project is a grassroots-led project that looks at challenges facing the community and how the foundational institutions of family, madrasah, and mimbar can be suitably equipped to overcome these challenges. In this series of presentations are conversations from various personalities of our community whose lives have touched many of us and shaped Khoja Shia Ishnashri Muslim community. Such conversations are of immense benefits to all in the community to understand our heritage as well as our community history. You will find more information on the challenges and solutions on the Awakening Project of the Khoja Shia Ishnashri Muslim community website and various YouTube presentations. Today we have with me Shaykh Abbas Jaffer. Assalamu alaikum, Abbas.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah, Dr. Sahib.
Abbas Jaffer was born in Mombasa in 1966 but raised in Nairobi, Kenya. He was born to a family environment that has a long history of community services, religious attainments, and charity contributions. His father, Marhum Mulla Asgherali Jaffer, was well-known community servant and a leader. His mother, Sakina Bai, also comes from a well-known Najaf Ali Dala family. He completed his primary and secondary education up to O levels in Nairobi and came to Watford, United Kingdom to complete his A levels. Subsequently, he pursued undergraduate study at City University, obtaining Bachelor of Science degree in Optometry. After qualifying in 1991, he remained in private practice until his retirement in 2023. Whilst treating patients in private practice, he also found time to pursue Islamic studies at ICAS Middlesex University, where he obtained BA in 2001 and MA in 2005. In 2002, he moved to Qum with family for 1 year of Hausa studies. He was a part-time lecturer at ICAS from 2003 to 2010, teaching Qur'anic Sciences to first-year undergraduates and Qur'anic Eschatology to second years. Subsequently, he moved to Syria for 3 months to study Arabic at the International University in Damascus. He also lectured part-time at various. He also lectures part-time at various centers in Muharram, Ashare Zainabiyya, and Maya Mubarak Ramadan time, as well as giving assorted talks on many religious gatherings. In London, when he's in London, he runs a Hadith class for youth and tafsir session for young married couples. His academic and publication attainments include co-authoring with his wife Masma Bai a textbook in Qur'anic Sciences as the core work on the subject for ICAS, translated several works into English from Persian and Arabic, including a thematic tafsir of Sayyid Mustafa Lari, a biography of Janab Fatima alayha salam by Sheikh Bamanpur, a work on eschatology by Sheikh Bamanpur, a work on methodology of tafsir for ICAS, as well as the Chronicles of Imam Husayn alayhi salam, and several shorter treatises such as spiritual aspect of Hajj and etiquettes of ziyarah. He writes in his CV that I am deeply interested in children and youth religious education, being a madrasah teacher for 15 years and the principal of Shia Ithnashri Madrasah from 1996 to 2000. He's married to Masuma Bai, a ma'alima in her own right, daughter of Muhammad Bakir Barwani and Nazma Bai Habib Qasim Manji. They have 2 boys, Shahid son and Mustafa Hussain, daughter Tahira Mahdiya, and mashallah, 5 grandchildren. Welcome, Abbas Bai.
Thank you, Sir.
Okay, well, this is a really commendable quest with a determined purpose in life. So what are you doing presently talk to us about your sort of current pursuit in life.
Well, currently, my wife and I are living half the time in London and half the time in a village outside Mombasa, working on the tafsir of the Quran. It was something that we always wanted to do. And Alhamdulillah, the opportunity has presented itself. So about 5 years ago, we began with a small issue where we discussed Surah Fatiha and the four Quls. But later on, then it became into a project of tafsir of the entire Quran. So we began from the 30th juz. We took a year to do. And then subsequently, every year we do 2 more juz. We've done the 29, 28, 27, 26, and 25. We're currently working on the 24th, inshallah ta'ala. We'll have that ready in the month of Ramadan, or rather just after.
So when do you think this project will finish? Inshallah.
Yeah, at the current rate, it's
With
taking
God
about
willing. God willing. Yeah.
exactly, God wills, a year to do 2 juz, and there are another 24 left. So it's a 12-year project. From our side, at least, we're not taking on anything else except this. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills, then inshallah we will see it through.
So Abbas, I hope you don't mind me calling you Abbas.
No, please, please.
So why did you choose to go to Mombasa to do this work? I mean, it's interesting. Why not London? Why Mombasa? Is it distraction or something like that? Or
Primarily, yes. I mean, the pace of work in London is much slower because of other distractions, and I wanted to be able to do it in a way that there is a reasonable pace to the work, because it was taking 1 year to do a juz in London, and that would be asking 30 years from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a very tall order. If life was there, probably the brain cells would not be there. And if the brain was working, maybe life would come to an end. So to show dedication to it, my wife and I realized that we have to be away from London, at least part of the year. So the search began about where we would go. And this particular village, it's called Karbala, where we live. It's a remote village.
how far is it from Mombasa?
It's about an hour and a half drive from Mombasa.
Okay.
And
So, yeah, go on, Abbas.
This is our second stint here. We did 4 months early in the year. Now we're here for another 4 or 5 months. And alhamdulillah, each time we have managed to complete a juz of the Quran.
Okay. What's the village life like in where you are?
It's different. It takes some getting used to. It's a small village in the sense that I don't know exactly how many people, but it's mainly a Muslim village. About 80% of the people here are Muslim. So there are about 4 or 5 mosques. We hear the adhan all the time. It's a simple life, especially compared to London, but you soon get used to it. There are positives. There is this isolation. There is the sea nearby. It makes up for the fact that there's not electricity all the time. Electricity goes out sometimes for several hours, and that can be challenging in the heat.
Yeah.
But other than that, we've got used to it. So much so that we came back quite eagerly the second time round, because it was very productive, fruitful for us.
So let us pray that we have the electricity whilst we are having this conversation. I want to just move on to before I move on to something else. What is really interesting for me when I read your CV is that your primary interest was career in optometry, but then you changed to actively pursuing Islamic studies. Did something, I mean, we'll explore some of the things afterwards, but did something spark within you that precipitated this transition? Share with us your inner feelings. Why this transition?
From quite an early age, there was something that fascinated me. I mean, it was partly to do with observing my own father, Marhum, rahmatullah alayhi, and seeing him able to be both had a professional career. He went to India and learned optics and came back and opened a few stores. He was a businessman, but he was also a community worker. He was also a scholar. He found time for both things. And that was always something that I think was percolating in my mind. But later on, I was fascinated by a class of companions of the Imam, Imam al-Sadiq, even Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, and later on the 10th, 11th Imam. Many of their companions were businessmen and merchants. If you look at their, what we call in Gujarati, atak, their nasab, you will find clues about their trade. So there would be, for example, Abu Basir, the famous companion, was known as Hattabi because he used to make a special kind of cloth that was much in demand, and he would travel selling that cloth. At the same time, he was one of the companions of Imam al-Sadiq. Or, for example, Al-Farra, another companion, was a person who dealt in hides and leather and used to travel as a merchant, and many others. Khallat used to make a special dyed cloth, which was very much in demand, and he used to go and sell that. But the interesting thing was, when they were in Medina, they did not just sit in Imam's majlis. Rather, they were formal students of the Imam, and he would take time to teach them separate disciplines. And that always fascinated me, the ability to be Ruwat al-Hadith, to be able to disseminate the teachings of Rasulullah and Ahlul Bayt, at the same time to have one foot squarely in business and dunya. So that was something that I wanted to aspire to. And alhamdulillah, I got that chance where I was able to take time out, carve time out from my professional career to pursue these other things as well.
No, that's interesting, and I can see the logic of it, and of course the inspiration where it comes from. You're retired now from the active professional life. So what's happening running the various optometric enterprises that you set up? Your son running it?
Yeah, alhamdulillah. So part of the plan was always to keep one eye on what would happen at retirement, because I did not see myself working past a certain age. I'd always promised myself that I would stop at around the age of 55 and then pursue something else. And to do that, alhamdulillah, what I did was right from the beginning when the kids were young, I would take them into the practice, hoping that one of them would think about optometry as a career. And as it turned out, both of them are optometrists. So alhamdulillah, in fact, all three are optometrists. And so Tahira and her husband Imran Ali live in Oman, but the two boys, my two boys, Shahid Hassan and Mujtaba, run the practice.
Okay. Now, let's move on to, you were born in Mombasa and subsequently moved to Nairobi. Why was this move? Was it your Marhum father had a business in Nairobi that you moved?
See, my father, as I said, there was many parts of him that only later on I realized that he was a planner with foresight. He was only 23, 24 when my Dada Bapa passed away. My Dada Bapa, Marhum, may Allah have rahmah on him, passed away in his late 50s, suddenly, leaving behind 10 children, the eldest of whom was Papa, and the youngest was 6-year-old. So he had all his siblings. There was one family business in Mombasa, Jaffer. So Marhum Papa realized that as the brothers were getting older, it was necessary for him to open other practices or explore other cities. So starting with Arusha, he went and lived there and started a practice there. And then decided that he wanted to try the capital, Nairobi. So the whole family moved when I was just 2 years old. And we moved to Nairobi, where he started a shop. And in later years, then as the brothers got older, there were 6 brothers, he would ask them to move to these cities. So we had shops at that point in Mombasa, in Arusha, in Nairobi, and a factory also. Papa set up a factory in Nairobi. So this was to, if you like, accommodate the needs of the family as they were getting older. So it was a move for this reason more than anything else.
So, do you have any special sort of memory when you were a child that you can share with us? A very special memory. Because I have a subsequent question that I have put in here.
Yes.
How much your early sort of upbringing in Kenya shaped your life, and how much influence your mom and dad, father and mother, had in shaping your life? Perhaps you can sort of bring all this together, because that might be better. Yeah, go on. Share something.
Growing up in Kenya in the 70s was a beautiful experience. I mean, in those days, life was considerably simpler, and we would live with the people. I mean, we roamed around town. We had friends from different communities. We were very comfortable with one another, visiting each other's houses. So, and you know, you grew up in typical East African fashion, speaking many languages quite naturally. We spoke Swahili in the streets. Majlis in the mosque was in Urdu. At our home, we spoke Gujarati. School, we spoke English. And we were able to just speak this variety of languages almost without trying to learn them. You just pick them up. And that allowed us to communicate with almost everybody around us. Later on, these languages, I realized the value of them on journey, on travel, especially once I moved to the UK, that when you travel for Hajj, Ziyarat, etc., and you meet people from different communities, you can communicate with them much easier than, for example, my children would be able to, just by living in those places. That was the first thing. The second was that the home was one where there was constant visitors. In fact, in Nairobi was underdeveloped in those days, literally a Marhum track. And then slowly development began in the 70s to make it a more modern cosmopolitan city. But if anybody was visiting Nairobi, the only address they probably had was Mulla, which means that we had a constant assorted amount of people coming in from Iraq, from Pakistan, from India, our own Khoja brethren from Madagascar, etc. And so I got to meet a lot of people. And I found that fascinating. Different languages, different ideas, and so on. And if you like, the third thing that shaped was there was a religious ethos in the family, which was very helpful. Certain things we grew up with, which stayed with us forever: respect of religion, respect of ibadat, respect of Ahlul Bayt, the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt alayhimu salam, the love of the Qur'an, etc., which was instilled in us almost naturally by us watching how these things were practiced in the home.
So, Abbas, presumably, when you encountered difficulties, your first stop, maybe your dad?
Please repeat that, sorry.
All right, okay. In terms of difficulties in your life, the first stop to get some advice that can put you straight or maybe useful would be your dad, the first station?
Yes, yes. Especially once I was older and I had decisions to make with, responsibility for my own choices, etc. In London life. Papa Marhum was a rock. And, you know, it's not an exaggeration when I say that everything he would say when I asked him for advice, I found it just right for what I was looking for at that particular time, whether it was an answer to a direct fiqh question or an answer to about something that I wanted to try but wasn't sure, advice about madrasah or other things. I always found that was very valuable getting his input, and he always seemed to have something that would end the dilemma in my head. And I miss that the most. When he passed away suddenly in 2000, for a long time, I would find myself picking up the phone and pressing speed dial for his number in WF office, only to remember that he's no more. I found that particularly difficult struggle.
No, we all found that day very sad. Tell me, when he gave you advice, was his approach much more pragmatic and contextual, understanding the environment that we were, and then he sort of advised you? Would he be so complete like that?
Yes, I mean, in some cases, he was experienced in the matter. In other cases, perhaps the detail of it was something he was not familiar with. So he would ask me to explain the issue. Once I'd explained to him that, look, these are the things that I am struggling to make a decision with, then he would advise. And it was very interesting. I could normally tell when he was being a little bit stern or he was being a little bit forceful because he would change tenses. He wouldn't say tu. He would say tamiyam karo to saruche. And I realized that he's being very serious now, or he really wants me to do it this particular way. And that was very interesting about him, that he would shift to the sort of respectful plural form of address.
Yes, sorry, Abbas, which give weight to what you say.
Yes, I guess.
Yeah. No, that's the technique. So, Abbas, you came to United Kingdom then. How old were you then?
I was 18.
18, yeah.
Just turning 18. I did 1 year of A level, the second year of my A level in London, in Watford. And then the following year, I went into optometry at City.
Yes, now I can understand, and I think the audience will understand why you chose optometry. You have a background of that, which you lucidly explained to us. But what I want to ask you, what was your impression of life in London? I mean, you were young and you came to London, presumably first time, and you saw life in the West compared to life that you were living in Nairobi and Mombasa and Kenya generally. So what was your impression, and share with us?
Yes, it was a very strange experience, at least in the first few months, because everything was very different. The way of thinking, the structure, the people, and the kind of things that were important to them, even our own people. It was definitely those who had been in England for a while. They did not think particularly like the people back home. They had somehow evolved in their understanding of things. I found that strange. I found the weather, of course, particularly strange. I remember distinctly the day I landed was the 5th of the month of Ramadan in May 1986, and fasts were 19 hours. And I had never imagined such a thing. That people were fasting, and I remember those days at Stanmore, Papa would be giving talks, while everybody is fasting, right up to namaz time. Then there would be salat, and there would be the iftar, only to begin 3-4 hours later. So those things took some getting used to. I used to play a lot of tennis in Kenya in my teenage years, especially from the age of about 14 to 18. I played a lot of tennis, and at one point was playing for Kenya, the national team. And when I left and came to England, I tried playing tennis, but the weather, it beat me. I mean, the fact was I didn't have the money to play indoors. And whenever I would try to play outdoors, it was either too windy, too cold, and it just didn't work out. So I gave up my beloved tennis as well.
Maybe there's a maslaha behind that, Abbas. That's why you pursued and and you are where you are at the moment. There's a hand of destiny behind you. Why ICAS? I don't want to go into optometry because I think you've covered that subject very well, and we understand why you went into optometry. But I just want to explore a little bit about ICAS. What was your motivation in joining ICAS? Why ICAS?
So I was beginning to think about further studies in further Islamic studies, and there was a couple of choices. One of them was this newly created ICAS. It had been around for a few years by then, when I joined in 1999, but it had an excellent faculty at that time. Some of our best lecturers who lived in the UK were lecturing there. My wife had already begun studying there, and she found the experience very good. There was Marhum, Sayyid Fadil Milani. There was Marhum, Shaykh Jaffer Ilmi. There was Aghay Bahmanpur. There was Aghay Shomali, Dr. Jasim Hussain. These were excellent tutors, and they were teaching this program. So I decided to try it, and I loved it. I really enjoyed it and registered for the program. And I finished it in those 3 years before the family and I moved to Iran.
So obviously the level and the standard of teaching was, according to yourself, it was very good.
Yes, they had got accreditation from Middlesex University. They were being supervised by them. And so their material was being vetted. Their classes were being checked to make sure that they were at the level that Middlesex were satisfied with, because ultimately they would be giving the degree. And their tutors were also second markers on all these scripts and papers, especially second year onwards. So in the first year, they were not very worried about it, but second and third year and the BA dissertations were marked by Middlesex.
In your opinion, did you feel that the level of intake of students that are coming to ICAS were of certain, the level of standard that the intake was at ICAS? How do you, because I also taught at ICAS for 2 or 3 years, ethics.
Yes.
Primarily the way I took the subject on was different from what I expected from other students or other teachers who have perhaps come from the Hausavi studies. But the level of intake, was there a difference there? Did you
I
find?
think I understand your question. Initially, yes. So in the early days, they were quite strict about their entry criteria. And the students who by and large came were serious students and had the pre-qualifications that they asked for. And then later on, for whatever reason, they reduced the intake standard, possibly to increase the number of undergraduates and so on. And then the kind of intake was not academically at the level of BA. And I raised it with them and as well. And the stark truth was that by making it very difficult to join, they were not getting hardly any students. And so they had to balance that, against the standards that they demanded from the intake. As I said, I was there for 7 years. And during that time, yes, the quality of the intake was gradually getting less.
Okay, Abbas, this nicely brings me to your core contributions towards deepening knowledge of Islam and spreading it as well. I want to explore this in some depth. I hope you do not mind sharing your thoughts on this, and I'm sure it will be appreciated by our audience. Now, some years ago, you translated Qur'anic Sciences with your wife, Masuma. There appears to be a revived interest in learning the Qur'an in our community, as a few centers and scholars are now holding weekly tafsir classes in person and on Zoom. I mean, this is now a fact. Despite these noble efforts, do you feel our community, and indeed wider Shia community, pays enough attention to learning and understanding the Quran in our community programs? I think a candid conversation would be nicer because it will also help people who are listening.
See, Quranic Sciences was written because at that time, the books on that subject, it was one of the core subjects in ICAS's first year, but the books that were being recommended to the students were not books written by Shia scholars. They were written by, for example, Ahmad von Denfer and other scholars. Yasir Qadhi had a work on it, which was fine, but the contribution of Ahlul Bayt and Shia scholars was largely underrepresented. And so Quranic Sciences was not a translation, but was a core textbook written to redress that imbalance. However, the Quran studies, you bring a very interesting point. I am particularly hopeful, optimistic, for three reasons. Number one, there is a renewed interest. That interest was not there before in the Quran in terms of understanding the revelation. Recitation is one thing, but now recitation is supplemented by a need to understand God's word, and the idea being to understand, to apply it, inshallah wa ta'ala. The second reason I'm optimistic is that increasingly there are these circles, both live and in video, run by Shias. Previously, if you wanted to get those lectures in English language, our boys and girls were listening to non-Shia speakers, which again is not a bad thing, but it underrepresents the input of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam into tafsir. And the third thing is now that I actually see a genuine interest from the grassroots. So when a class is set up, back in the day, maybe we would have 10 people. In a recent class that I went to, there was 35. So there is interest, provided that you have a system, you have it regularly, you are leading them along on a surah or on a concept, and they see continuity in their learning. I think this is a good thing. And the project I'm working on now is in that vein, that we want to be able to make accessible to people tafsir in English so that they can continue with self-study as well.
Now, what I meant, I think I understand exactly your optimism there, and I share with you there. I share with your optimism. But what I was getting at was that the community programs that we have, they're not basically Quran oriented in its approach, in a much more focused, core way, because I think the community is denied of the understanding of the Quran if our community programs approaches in a Quranic central way, rather than Quranic center way. That's my point, that whilst there is a good development around, the community itself in its community program, the emphasis sometimes is lost. That's what I was getting at.
Yeah, I see. Yes, I mean, traditionally, this has been a criticism of Shia scholarship in Hausa as well, that more time is spent on hadith and analysis of Islamic subjects than on the Holy Book. Whereas our brothers, Ahlus Sunnah, seem to be much more familiar with the Quran than our scholars. Now, in the last few years, in the Hausa level, this has been addressed. And, I remember when I was in Qom, I can't remember how many years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, Ayatollah Khamenei made a comment that, it is said that the Shias are not so interested in the Quran. They have very few huffaz of the Quran, whereas Sunni Muslims have more. So he declared it, and maybe more than 5 years ago, he declared it the year of memorization. And lo and behold, today, Iran per capita has the most huffaz in the world. Now, for their population, their percentage is the highest in the world. And the reason is that it is not true that the Shias are not interested in the Quran. It is just that our way of teaching has been like that. When we were young, there was a particular recipe or template for a majlis. It included only one ayah, which was the mawzu, the ayah in the beginning, followed by this whole way of reciting it, where another ayah did not come at all. Several hadiths came, several stories came, followed by masaib, but there was only one ayah, قال الله في كتابه المجيد, and that was the ayah. That I feel is changing. So for example, in London, when I go to the mosque, I find that every program begins with a few verses of the Quran, translated as well. I find speakers recounting and reciting many more verses than they used to. Other than that, I'm not sure how we can make it completely Quran-centric unless it becomes just a tafsir session. There is still the wise, the mawzu to be discussed of the day, whatever it is, but we should try to base it on the Quran as much as possible. I agree with you.
What I'm saying to you is the emphasis has to be there on the Quran as a very primary source of understanding.
Undoubtedly, yes.
And if that is not there and something else becomes or emphasized, that was my point. And I think that when we have a trend of youngsters now trying to understand Quran, it would be better that if our community program sort of appreciates Quran in a very central way, so that we get those who are interested in Quran also participate in the community gathering. Sometimes regurgitating and all that, saying things doesn't appeal to many of the young people. Anyway, that's a different subject matter. Your book, Quranic Sciences, outlines the work and ideas of numerous Muslim scholars from the Sunni and Shia tradition about the nature, revelation, and compilation of the Quran. Now I'm coming to exactly the point that you just made before. Now, the book has a very useful section, such as the differences between muhkam, verse of the Quran, and mutashabihat. That's the metaphorical verse of the Quran, just for the Quran audience's understanding. The muhkam is the clear verses, and the other one, the mutashabihat, is the metaphorical verses. Now, this information is crucially important. Do you feel that now, having written this book, that's why I'm asking you this question, Abbas, do you feel the community member and madrasah know how to rely on clear verses of the Quran rather than verses interpreted in speculative ways or relying on fabricated hadith to understand Islam? It's a very pointed question, Abbasia. Because you have written the book, I'm asking you the practical aspect of it here within the community. Do you feel that these are interpreted in speculative ways?
Yeah, I'm not a great fan of the word speculative. You see, the Quran has mutashabih, verses which are equivocal, which can have different meanings depending on the context and the situation. And that is part of its miraculous nature. That is why the Quran can be read by a youngster as well as an older person, a scholar as well as a lay person. The same person, as he grows up, the Quran brings fresh ideas and new meanings for him because of this mutashabih. So what we have been told to do is to actually understand the mutashabih, to bring them towards what we know from muhkam, and try to understand them from that. It is not something that we would expect a madrasah child to do. However, when we do tafsir, if there is a verse that is not quite clear in its meaning, I mean, let's look at it. All the verses on eschatology, for example, every verse to do with akhirah and day of judgment is mutashabih. You know, we don't understand what these terms mean. What does it mean, rivers of milk and rivers of honey? You know, the Quran is constrained, if you like, by the lack of experience and of human beings. They cannot understand those concepts. So it uses language that gives us an approximation, if you like, of the reality. But that reality will only be experienced when we go and see it in that realm. So these verses then, they need to be brought back to clearer verses to try to understand. It's not something that one should engage in speculation about. And certainly what used to happen, even from the earliest days, was people would use mutashabihat for their own agendas. So they would say, this favors our school of thought because, look, this verse says this. And the other one across the room would say, no, this other verse actually favors our school of thought because, look, it says this. And so right from the beginning, there was this hadith that man fassara al-Qur'ana bi ra'yihi. Whoever tries to do tafsir of the Quran according to his own opinion has chosen a place or a seat in the fire of hell. So it wasn't meant to be used in this manner.
My point, yeah, Abbas, my point here, I mean, I understand. My point here is that having written this book, which you have, do you feel that the scholars know how to rely then on clear verses, the muhkam verses, rather than the verses interpreted in the other ones? So the point is that do you feel that that is there? I mean, that's your observation. Yeah.
Scholars who are mufassirun, who have devoted their life to tafsir, our scholars of this century as well as our more ancient scholars have always spent time on the mutashabih verses. In fact, it is what gives them the most not confusion, food for thought, but it's the danger lies in taking a verse that seems to have one meaning that is not clear and then deciding that this is the meaning. That is where there is a big danger, and it is something that is discouraged, completely discouraged. At best, one can say that if you take a meaning that seems at odds with other people, you can perhaps take it for yourself, but you certainly cannot start telling other people that this is what Allah means here. That is a specialist science and one for scholars. And that is why in the tafsir that we're doing, we don't claim to be mufassirin. We are literally compiling from those scholars.
That's right. I understand that. Yeah. No, I see where you're coming from. I just wanted your observation on what was happening at this moment in time in the mimbar, whether uh, the scholarship relies more on the clear verses rather than the other verses, and then sort of make their points hugely. Anyway, I understand where you're coming from, Abbas. You have recently translated the Chronicles of Imam Hussein by Mohammed Reyshahri, which is an excellent and detailed translation demonstrating the authenticity of historical sources on Karbala. What was your motivation in translating this work?
Well, this work gave me a lot of food for thought. It had come across my radar earlier, about 3 years before I started to translate it. Marhum Reyshahri and Darul Hadith, which is the Institute for Hadith Studies he set up in Qom, they worked for 10 years on this project, producing a total of 15 volumes, each one about 700-800 pages long, on just the life of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn from every extant source. Any manuscript or published material they found, they included it in this entire work, and after which they say there is nothing else that has been written about Abu Abdullah al-Husayn. From that, this particular one was culled into a book that described Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam's departure from Medina and the return of the Qafila back to Medina post Karbala. And that is the work that I translated. Now, I mentioned in the foreword a couple of reasons. It was never my wish and to actually make the work something which makes people lose heart in the story by saying that so many of the things don't seem to be there, which we are hearing from mimbar. That means the whole thing is suspect. Rather, if you read the work, you will see that much more than what we hear of Masaib actually did transpire in Karbala. And it is our duty to Ahlul Bayt alayhimu salam and to Abu Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi salam to know more details about the tragedy. But my concern mainly was that in the last 10 years or so, I had begun to hear things in the name of Masaib and Musibah of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi salam that sounded increasingly far-fetched, in the name of making people cry or lament, which itself is a noble thing, but not at the expense of made-up things, you see. And so I was looking at the time to write a maqtal text from as authentic the sources as possible. And then this work came across, to me that, look, what about this? Doesn't mean to say that there are no other works besides this that are reliable, but the methodology employed by Darul Hadith was very interesting. What they said, and they looked at over 300 manuscripts, they said whatever is produced in the first 3 centuries after the tragedy of Karbala is the gold standard, and we'll take from that. Whatever is produced after that has 2 categories. One of them is fairly reliable, and one of them, the onus of proof is on the author. He needs to show where he got these hadiths from, which are absent in the earliest sources. So this was the methodology, and they stuck true to that. In the process, they brought to light a lot more than is normally known about the whole event, and removed many of the well-loved stories as, in their words, fabrication, and absent in the earlier sources. Not only absent in the earlier sources, but absent in any source. As Marhum Reyshahri said, that I don't say that it is only available in weak sources. I say it is not available in any written source, weak or otherwise. Just bring me that riwayah from anywhere. We have searched. The team who wrote it was 30-people team in Darul Hadith, all with an expertise in hadith studies. So the way I see it, that our loyalty to our Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi salam, part of it is to try to find out the most accurate version of what happened to him. It will not make us weep less. I feel it will make us weep more when we realize the depth of his sacrifice. But at the same time, we should not be afraid to gradually let go of well-loved, well-known, familiar stories once we are told that they don't exist. They just are not there. And so, rather than come out and say, oh, this didn't happen, I feel that such stories should just gradually die a natural death and be removed from our members, organically.
It's a noble objective. I must say, but I think we have been brought up so much. So I mean, throughout our life, we have heard the same sort of messiah, which may not be actually correct, as you say. And the trend was increasing, as you say, the last 10 years. How did I'm just thinking aloud with you, Abbas, how did the ulama and the Hausa academic institution receive your book?
Well, I don't know about my work, but Aghay Reyshahri himself, in his foreword to the work, Danishname Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, he says that he himself went through a period of self-doubt before he embarked on the whole project. He admits that in his foreword. But he writes that the response of ulama was, to his surprise and relief, one of encouragement. And it was a very good response. So this is what he says. My own limited feedback from the work. You see, the work was produced in COVID time. ICAS wanted to really send it to all the jamaats, all the mosques, in Muharram of that year, and they planned everything, and then COVID hit. When COVID hit, there was no majlises in Muharram live anymore. Everything was done on the thing. So it lost a little bit of its, if you like, momentum. But now the books are getting out. The feedback I receive is mixed, I must admit. Some people are a bit bemused at why this would be of use, because it seems critical of some of the things that I heard from Mimbar. Others have been very positive to say that, look, this is something that at least now we know that these are maqtal things. These are things we can genuinely grieve over. And those who have read it find that there was much, much more than we hear normally that happened to this holy family. So it's been mixed in English. I presume.
No, sorry, Abbas, go on. Finish the point. I'm sorry.
So I was saying, I presume that would have been the case in the original Arabic and Persian.
That's right. Yeah. But also, Abbas, Shahid Mutahari's book was available a long time ago on the distortions of Ashura.
Yes. Yes.
And indeed, in the preface and introduction of Chronicles of Imam al-Husayn, this book was also mentioned, I think. But having that book
there's always been a group of scholars, yes, who wanted to prepare something more reliable. In fact, there were attempts to make them, but you've got to remember that the momentum on the other side is extremely strong. The number of majalis that are being recited, and I don't mean to cast any blame or say it's a wrong thing, but the number of majalis that are being recited daily in the Shia world is a huge amount. And there is an expectation from the audience to hear musibah. Now, if, for example, you become very dry in reciting musibah, you may disappoint the audiences. So the work here is to be able to look at texts and then reproduce them in the most emotional and heart-rending way. But at least you are doing it. Ibn Tawus, Marhum, he's written al-Luhuf. he said to people, it's almost 500 years ago, he said to people, recite whatever you want, but recite from the book. From my book, preferably, where I worked hard, but recite from a book. Do not recite from memory. Recite from a text written by a scholar, and then decide how to say it and how to render it.
But
So this is the thing.
yeah.
There's a lot of momentum on the other side.
That's right. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
remember in the launch of the book, I said something that amused some of the scholars who were there. I said, you know, one of Agha Behjat's students said that whenever we used to go for tabligh in the month of Ramadan to different villages and all that, when we returned, Agha Behjat would ask us, how did it go? What were the people like? These are only his students, you know, his special students. He would debrief them and say, how did it go? So he said, I was telling him that I came back from such and such village in Iran, and they were very nice people, but they had one unusual habit. And Agha said, what? He said that they wanted masaib in my Zohar namaz after the Zohar, in the Zohar lecture, and they wanted masaib in my night lecture, although it was month of Ramadan. So Agha said, it's not bad, you know, musib of Imam Hussain is not a bad thing. Then this fellow says, I told Agha that, yeah, I wasn't reciting in Zohar. Only I recited Masaib in Maghrib. And Agha immediately picked up on that, and he said to him, in that case, I wish you hadn't recited after Maghrib as well. And the subtle point here is he was trying to say to Agha that in the daytime, you know, there is a clear hadith and clear fiqh rule that if you ascribe a lie to Ahlul Bayt knowingly while you fast, your fast is broken immediately. So what he was saying was that I was being careful while fasting not to recite Masaib, because my Masaib is deliberately contains false material. So Agha told him, in that case, don't recite at night either. Because if you are content to lie in the day, you should be ashamed to lie in the night. See? And this is the case where each person has to say to themselves, how honest am I being? How loyal am I being to the legacy of Imam Hussain alayhi salam? Let it not be that tomorrow he says to me, Tane khabar ati aawat khotish. But just because it was something that would bring about an emotion you felt in the people, you said something that was a lie about me. So this is where this book and books like it, I feel, have their place.
And I hope that this book obviously produced the effect that that you had in mind. But the point that I was trying to make was that we had this book from Shahid Muttahari for some time, and obviously nobody, at least ordinarily, talks about this book at all, because they have heard the Messiah from the mimbar, maybe very exaggerated. The issue is that the person who is reciting it is then justifying it, that we're making Imam Hussein's emotions even much more powerful, embedded within the levels of Imam. So there's always some sort of justification given, whereas this can then just get exaggerated and exaggerated and exaggerated, unfortunately. Yeah.
I think that the number of scholars who exaggerate without care are, alhamdulillah, relatively few. In the main, scholar is a scholar. He is sitting on mimbar of Rasul, and he is cognizant of his responsibilities. But there is this whole issue of qal and qil. What I've heard growing up, logo se suna hai, ulamao kehte hain, kitabon mein likha hai. See, these kind of things, and then you pretty much say what you want. This habit can be, if you like, circumvented a little bit by saying, read from written material. Especially to our young and aspiring lecturers, we say to them, make sure you found which book it is in. Then how you present will be a test of your own skill in communication. but at least the main facts are there from written sources. And
Yeah,
you can decide
yeah.
on
But
your criteria.
I see we don't have any qualitative sort of work done on this in the sense that whether it's reducing, it's the same, or it's deepening in any way, or in any other areas of the world. We haven't done, or we haven't got those qualitative work with us. But we just have general perception there. But I agree that hopefully the person who is now climbing on the member is much more aware of his responsibility. And given book like yours and Shahid Mutahari's, they've got now a good source available for them to read from and cannot say that we don't have a good source. Now we have a good source available in English with your good work, with yours and Marhum Abai's good work. Can I move on, Abbas?
Yes.
Today we live in a world of information technology where opinions and views about the Islamic tradition, politics, media, history, and more are all accessible by young, old, male, and female alike. What is the best way to manage, in your opinion, what is the best way to manage differences of opinion about interpretation of the Quran, history, or fiqh in our community?
Uh, you see, it depends at which level the community, which level the conversation is happening. There are certain levels at which the communication will be by concerned parties who are not experts, who do not have the background to perhaps look at the deeper issues. But I feel the gap lies in mutually respectful communication by scholars, where they are willing to say that the other person's view is not their view. They accept that. But at the same time, it is a viewpoint by somebody who has uh, gone through the system, who has studied, and so is worth hearing them out. At the end, one can agree to disagree. There is no harm in that. This is the way of scholarship over the centuries in the Muslim world, in the Shia world. There were people, scholars, who vehemently disagreed with one another, but they would visit each other's majalis, they would speak to one another. Um, you know, for example, Wahid Bahbahani, who is credited to have put the nail in the coffin of Akhbarism at his time. He would say to his students, I don't like you to go to Yusuf Bahrani's class, Yusuf Bahrani the Akhbari. Yusuf Bahrani replied by saying, but if I die, I want Wahid to lead my prayers. There was disagreement, but there was a fundamental respect of the other. I think this is something that we can all learn from. I may not disagree with you. I may not agree with you, rather, but that doesn't mean that you are my enemy in other ways. You know, this sometimes I think doesn't happen enough. As for other people who are discussing, the trouble is, and I don't mean this in any boastful way, I include myself in it. A lot of times people discuss things that they don't understand. You know, when two people are fighting over a fiqh issue, the answer to that is refer it to a faqih, refer it to a jurist. Now you're arguing whether rojo should be broken at this time, and I am saying it shouldn't be broken at that time. Neither of us is a jurist. Refer it to a lawyer, a jurist, and let him come with the final word. End of story. Why are you and I debating on something that we have no clue about how it works? So I think part of the problem sometimes is that people get overexcited on matters in which neither party has the requisite knowledge. So in those times, refer them to those who have the knowledge. That does not mean that we have silenced our intellect.
Mm.
You may have your expertise in your own field. You may, it was very interesting. I was reading that somebody said that A doctor asked Ayatollah Khomeini when he was in hospital during the last illness, may Allah have rahmah on him, that why do we find you so diligent in taking the medication that we have prescribed? You are the one who says, it's time for my medicine, the medicine you prescribe. Why are you so diligent? He said to them, because you are the experts I recognize and respect in this matter. And I want you to have the same diligence when you follow me in my fatwas, the way I am following you in your guidance. So each to his own expertise, but respect that I don't have the background in this, in which case I shouldn't argue unnecessarily in this, but refer the matter. I think this is part of the issue that AI, this proliferation of WhatsApp, Google and all the rest, make people feel much more able, that they know much more than they truly know. They know a little bit about a lot of things, but they don't know much about any one particular thing. And this is dangerous.
No, I agree, Abbas, that we live in a situation where there's active social media, information is accessible everywhere. And therefore, many a times, young mind needs perhaps a balanced way of approaching a subject matter and then guiding him in the right way. Doesn't mean that you be disrespectful to another opinion or another evidences that are also present within our sources. The point that I'm making is that given the situation that we have very active access to information of varieties of sorts, our the mind of the community members is sometimes confused. And so the role of the member there becomes extremely important. You can't negate that we have a challenge of the time, which I've just described to you. The ability of the person on the member then to provide or take or walk with the issue and guide him to the right area is crucially important. In which case,
Yeah.
he may have to present both the sides and then arrive at what the faqih or the major scholars are at the moment, what the consensus is. This is what I was sort of alluding to when there's a difference of opinion. And then you very rightly say that, look, there must be maturity in this. There must be respect for each other, respect for the views and all that. And but neglecting what the challenge is out there, and then the member not providing the guidance that is necessary, particularly in the times that we are living in, that was what I was alluding to. But anyway, you give your sort of opinions, and also brought up a very, very good point that there must be maturity in all this sort of thing, because you cannot ignore. Yeah. Yeah, go on. Go on.
One more thing I wanted to add to that is we have to be very clear about the function of mimbar. There used to be a time where mimbar was a source of information. Now a lot of this information is already in the hands of the people. I think the mimbar has become a platform for inspiration, for what to do with the knowledge that both you and I already have. The audience and the reciter have that knowledge, but what the person does is able to craft what to do with that knowledge, how to be inspired by it. A lot of the people who come to lectures, if they are moved 1 inch in the right direction, then the lecture has been successful, because you have put something in their mind that has caused them to think, to reevaluate their current position. And so mimbar doesn't become more of information, but inspiration, I feel. The second thing is that, this is my own personal view, that we got to understand that there is a difference between mimbar, which is a monologue, versus a seminar, for example, where there is some dialogue, there is some questioning, there is some plenary session afterwards, and so on. In a monologue, I don't think it's the best place to air out opinions and new ideas, new, if you like, theories, because there is no right of reply on the other side. The person cannot ask for clarification and so on. So I am increasingly of the view that on a mimbar, you don't come and give very theoretical or intellectual presentations. Those are for their own setting. A mimbar is a place to inspire greater love for God. And if you have managed to do that in one or two of your listeners, then I think that is a successful majlis. This is my opinion anyway.
No, understandably, I understand where you're coming from. I'm also quite aware that in today's time, when people come to community gathering and a scholar is giving exposition on a subject matter, that it's not beyond his wit not to craft a subject matter in a way that allows the contemporary confusion to be removed and allow a guidance material to be inserted in such a way that it becomes an inspiration. But, there are obviously, we live in in a time where so many things are accessible, and then our own community members are looking to our own scholars to guide them. And Mimbar is one such platform where they do look to it. And I know it has to be inspirational, but it has to be contemporaneously inspirational. It has to also take into consideration the contemporary challenges that a community is subjected to, both in the political terms, in socio-economic terms, in moral terms, in morality, in spirituality, all that. And a scholar has to be aware that he lives in a time and ethos that he has to provide some sort of material that removes the confusion from the mindset of the people. Now, I understand there can be a limited role for member, then that may then be extended. The sort of platform can be extended into seminar and other things. But crucially important is the fact that Alim is there to look at the contemporaneous challenges and see how he best can walk the community towards a proper guidance. Anyway, that's the, yeah, I think, can we move on, or you've got something to say?
No, please.
All right. Okay. What do you feel? I think we have covered, well, might be interesting. What do you feel our young people's concerns and challenges in practicing and understanding Islam is in the 21st century? Now, particularly as I see it, less numbers attend mosques or may form their own Muslim identities outside of the community context. You have a view on that, Abbas?
I've thought about it a little bit. It is an unenviable sort of thing to navigate for a young Muslim at the moment, living in the West especially, and a Shia Muslim. There are unprecedented pressures on his faith. So he comes to a regular mosque and is faced with, say, things that are cultural, traditional, either in terms of the language or the programming style or what is done day to day. So that's one challenge, because he doesn't think like that. That is not how he was taught in school. He doesn't identify with the style of, for example, a lot of poetry recited in a language he cannot understand very, very well. Even the presentation style is, so that is one problem, how to get kids into the mosque. But the second thing is that it's very easy, it seems to me, in the West to become what I think of as a kind of hyphenated Muslim. cafeteria, if you like, Muslim, where you certainly are a Muslim in certain settings, whether it's the mosque or in a ziyarah trip. But in real life, the workplace, the school place, Islam seems like a kind of imaginary thing, not practical. It's not real life, because real life is the kind of challenges you are facing every single day. And so there's this dichotomy in the thinking. It used to happen in East Africa, but a lot less. We were in touch with, if you like, the mosque and God's remembrance much more often during the day. Out there, if you're not in a major city, inshallah, you pray salat, but that will be the only 5 touch points you have with God the whole day. The rest of the time, you're busy with, if you like, being what I said, a hyphenated Muslim. Muslim plus something else, really. So it's a second challenge. So one is a cultural challenge that we need to make our programs for our youngsters. You know, English shouldn't be in the more uncomfortable part of the building, in the smaller part of the building. It should be the main lecture. It should be the where we expect our main audience to be. Our target audience is the people of tomorrow who will run these institutions. So I think I've kind of not answered your question directly to say what is the challenge of the person themselves, but for us, the real worry is, have we been able to transfer our values and what was faithfully given to us as a legacy by our parents? Have we done the same job to the next generation? Can we hand on heart say that 50 years from now, our grandchildren will be doing Azadari, will be running the programs in the way that we ran them? Have we let them down? So this is a constant worry that we should look at. Nothing else comes to mind straight away, but these are the kind of things that I worry about.
Right. Are we sort of making progress, Abbas? Do you think in that line, would you say that, say, for example, in the last 20 years or 10 years?
I think we are. When I first came to London and now, I notice a stark difference in the attitude of parents, young parents. For example, in those days, there was hardly much interest in madrasah. The madrasah was the first victim in any family plan. You would never plan on a weekday because that was a school day. But if you had to miss madrasah for a birthday party, no problem. Madrasah chene wando nathi. And that attitude I've seen changing now. Parents, especially parents of young kids, are extremely invested in the religious education of their children. I'm looking at London. I know there are many more resources available to them as well, but they will actually make sure their kids learn Quran, their kids attend madrasa, their kids attend masjid and Imam Bargah, that there are Islamic motifs in their house, that they take them to ziyarat and so on. For me, that is a generational change. I mean, certainly talking about London, that it was not the way one generation ago.
Okay, let's move on from there. How do you see the future of Islamic scholarship now? I'm talking about in the next 50 years in the East and West. I know that I'm putting you in a spot to talk about 50 years from now, but you may have some thoughts. The future of Islamic scholarship, I mean, in terms of its own successes and challenges, originality of thought, creating new frameworks within Islam, greater interaction between varieties of ideologies that are there, and putting across succinctly the Islamic thoughts so that the others can understand it in our own terms. Interaction really between Eastern and Western. Do you have any sort of thoughts on that? How do you see it as we go along?
It's not my direct area of expertise in terms of what the education institutions are planning. But I know this, that in conversations with scholars in Najaf 2 years ago, there is a desire to overhaul the system in Najaf especially, and to keep its own flavor, but to move things to a more modern footing. So the students traditionally were required to learn texts that were written more than 152 years, 200 years ago, that were using examples for fiqh that just are not relevant today, and so on, to something more modern. And in it's been going on for a while in certain circles. So 3 things that they're aiming for, to become more academic, relevant to other sciences as well, so modern sciences, that the scholars are not unable to address issues. So you would have a faqih, but he would have an expertise in something else. So this is being encouraged. So somebody who has a BA in economics would be encouraged then to become a faqih. So somebody who is an expert on biomedical issues, somebody who is an expert on, for example, economic issues. But at the same time, he is a faqih as well. He is able to give fatwa. These kind of things are being included now, which in the past were not considered as fiqhi subjects. The second is this taqrib al-madhahib, and also this idea that we need to interact with other madhabs, other faiths, take part in symposiums, international symposiums, which are outside our immediate Hausa setting. There is no point, well, I'm not saying there's no point, but in the past you would have a topic and Hausa lecturers would all speak about those topics. But it was always circulating in the same echo chamber. Now it would be a case of debating topics of interest, mutual interest with other faith groups. So I went to something called Faiths Together recently in London, which is an offshoot, a small offshoot of something like this. Faiths Together is people who are of different faith groups, but they all must be practicing their faith, that's all. So we had Sikh, we had Jews, we had Christian, Catholic and Protestant. We had a couple of Sunnis, we had myself as Shia. And there was a topic chosen, which was just simply whether, I mean, seems like a very tangential topic, but whether it is possible to raise a child in spiritual tradition. Can you make a child a spiritual child? So it was a very, very good discussion and eye-opening to both see startling similarities in faith traditions, as well as very obvious differences in the way we look at things. These things are now being increasingly, if you like, encouraged in Hausa, and certainly living in cosmopolitan cities as we do, we cannot just believe that the Imam Bargah is the nucleus of the Muslim world. There is a big world out there, and we need to be able to interact with it. And more so, we need to be able to hold our own in that environment and defend our faith and so on. So I challenge myself that I could give a majlis in any Khoja Imam Bargah in the world. But could I give a talk to a predominantly non-Muslim audience in, say, Hyde Park Corner? That would be something, a skill set I would have to learn.
And that's my point, actually. But, yeah, sorry, can I just cut you here? That's my point. In your discussion with the scholars, do you feel that they have this? Do you feel that they have something to learn from the methodology that the Western academia has, or do they feel that there's nothing they can learn from the methodologies and the approach of the Western academia. That's my crucial point. If they have that mindset, nothing can be gained from them.
Yeah,
Then,
for sure.
then your skill set that you would wish to adapt, that you can put across the concepts, Islamic concept, to an audience which basically has a complete different philosophical and ideological mindset, not understanding their ideological philosophical mindset, to put across your concept to a mindset of that can be a challenging thing. So I'm just thinking aloud with you that in the scholars in Najaf, do they feel they have something to learn from them, or they don't have anything to learn from them?
I can't speak
Because
for
there
the
is a
scholars in
mindset, by the way, Abbas, I have to say it. There is a mindset within the traditional scholarship that there is absolutely nothing we can gain from these people,
Yeah.
and everything is there in Najaf Qum, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about the mindset in this regard in Najaf, but in Qom, when I was there last, I was speaking to a couple of junior scholars, albeit, there is definitely that humility there to say, no, we have something to learn, with a caveat that, we sit in class with one thing as given, which is our faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we would like to base our methodology on that thinking. And then we may have different styles, of the detailed part of that methodology. But the primary thing is we base it on faith. If, for example, somebody has a completely different methodology based on skepticism, atheism, or no fixed proof that God exists, and wants to then base it, traditionally, the Hausa has said, we have no time for this. We cannot gain from this because we have moved to a position of belief, and this kind of thing is a waste of our time. So from that point of view, there was that reticence in the Hausa. But when it comes to sciences that are independent of these things, maybe something very basic like how to speak, how to research in modern methodologies, how to find information from different sources on a topic that you are researching. These kind of skills are now being brought into the Hausa and being taught by scholars from outside the Hausa, right? Because they have recognized those needs. Now, how far that movement towards accepting other things goes, I don't know. But there are, as you say, people who are quite convinced that we have nothing to learn from anything outside these four walls that our ancestors and predecessors have drawn out for us. But that is changing now.
Yeah, the two personalities that I have in mind is Bakr Sadr, who actually studied the ideologies that are other ideologies. It doesn't really matter where this comes, it's godly based or not. The fact is that there's a population there who believes in this particular ideology. How is Islam going to counteract that if you haven't understood that ideology? That's my point here, that look, no matter what, we live in a global world with different ideologies, and the Muslim scholars must be able to understand what makes them tick and how we can counteract it in a way that they also understand their own weaknesses there. That was my point. But anyway, I think we can't have this. It's a very interesting conversation of us, but I think you understand where I'm coming from. I've got a couple of questions before we end, Abbas, and we have to be brief here because I think it's already 1.5 hours of us. It's quite a very interesting conversation. I enjoyed it. But anyway, can I ask you this very quickly? There are increasing numbers of families moving to Oman, Dubai, and other countries due to the financial and moral climate of the UK, Brexit and LGBT syllabus and Islamophobia and all that. What is your perspective on the second migration of the Khoja Shia Ishnashris to these countries? And do you feel that in the UK we'll be able to balance this out with the rule of law and fairness to others, or do you think that there will be this migration continuing because we won't be able to achieve that fairness here? What's your, very quickly, Abbas, because we haven't got much time now.
I don't see signs of a mass exodus just yet,
Hmm.
because the situation has not become so dire, although it is unpleasant, difficult to raise children without constantly worrying about what they're hearing, trying to control what is coming into their minds and hearts. And going to Oman or other places, it is a solution. It's not a solution that is there for everyone, but for those families who can, especially when their kids are younger and in the formative years, say 3 or 4 or 5 years, be in that environment, would be very good. But it isn't a wholesale solution because there isn't a wholesale problem just yet.
But what do you say, just very quickly, what um, do you feel that the community is now basically here, and do you think that long term we'll be able to, given the rule of law in the United Kingdom and all that, that will balance out the fairness of the community's own sort of legitimate position within the British society? Do you feel that, or there's a danger to it? Very quickly.
No, I think that living here and fighting for rights here and fighting for our belief system and our values here is more important at this point in time than emigrating permanently. Something like Oman would be good, but not a permanent move and not for the whole community. I think that, but we have got to become a bit real. Our attitude in the West has been one of wishful thinking, I feel. We want change, but we are not willing to engage with the process that would bring about change. Hardly any councillors amongst us, certainly no MPs amongst us, and yet we want change. The change is in the hands of those who are not always our well-wishers. So we rely on the ballot box to get change done. It doesn't work like that. At the same time, nobody is willing to actually do that hard work and becoming, say, as I said, councillors. So the work is here, and it'll start by becoming engaged with the system, having our voice, having respect there, being able to look at our own values, but also a national agenda at that level, where we are seen as British and interested in Britain, as well as interested also in the affairs of the Muslims as part of that greater Britain.
Yeah, I understood. Okay, give me one positive about our own community and then one negative about our own community.
Which community?
And our own Khoja Shia Ishnashri community. Just give me one positive and then one negative. And don't give me those nyas and all that. No, please. Something intellectual, if you can. Positive, negative. And very quickly, how do you think we can improve the intellectual and spiritual dimension and our relationship with the wider society? Now, that's a bigger question, but just attempt a little bit of it, if you don't mind.
Maybe it's not the sophisticated answer you're looking for, but I think one of our greatest strengths, despite all our other weaknesses, is the community spirit that we have. The fact that we can walk into any of our communities worldwide and feel instantly a sense of homecoming. This is how our forefathers trained us. This kind of respect to Ahlul Bayt. This, you will go on a Thursday, you will hear Dua Kumel. Doesn't matter whether you are in Africa or America or Australia. You on Wiladat, you will hear about that personality, and there is that sense of belonging that I feel is unique in our community and one of our greatest strengths. As far as our weaknesses go, I personally feel that what we say, kanna kachache, we tend to accept narratives as if they are truth, whereas I wish that people, when they hear things, would go and say, September, I've heard this, and I'm asking you now, personally, face to face, is there any truth in it? And can you explain to me your thinking? And I can explain to you my reservation about it. And then we have a conversation and we finish it. Rather than me writing a letter to you and copying it to 80 people, in which there is no sincerity, this kind of thing. So I feel this is something that we are getting sucked into, which is a negative thing. If we want to improve, we need to have honest, sincere conversations with one another.
And
when
I think,
when you know that he has come to me alone, there is no other witness. You can't deny one thing. You may disagree, but you can't deny the sincerity of it. You may disagree with the message, but one thing you will know, okay, this man doesn't want to score points. He has come here with a sincere intention. That, unfortunately, is something that is lacking in the community.
Yeah, and that's our immaturity. And of course, then we do isolate scholars as well, who may have a difference of opinion, where they could have sat together and worked through everything. Lastly, I think it's the last question that I had was the intellectual and spiritual dimension. I think it's too much to sort of start a discussion on this, but do you have any sort of quick thought on our Khoja Shia Ishnashri relationship with a wider society? Do you think there's something more to be done there? I think you covered it up in your exposition before, but I'm just giving an opportunity now that we live in a plural society. What I mean by that is there are many ideologies that we encounter daily. So is there anything that we can do to improve our relationship with a wider society from that point of view? If you have something, because that's the last bit, I'm not going to ask you anymore.
Yeah, I mean, like back in the day, there was a very insular mindset that essentially the Khojas in their religious gatherings would hardly venture out of their own jamaats, out of their own imam bargas. This is something that we need to look at, I feel, that join in the meetings, gatherings of other Shia and even Sunni. If there is something happening in a Sunni mosque, a seminar that is of interest, go there. Go there as a Shia, introduce your mosque to them, and so on. I think this outreach is something that we need to do. It is happening in the younger groups, in the ABSOCs and such like, but the older people haven't quite caught up with it.
Yeah, and including Shia Sunni groups, as well as I think Christian Jews and others that might be community living beside you and around you.
Yeah. I mean, like the issue is when we go to these outer communities, we need to go prepared, because once they know who we are, they will ask some very pointed questions.
That's right.
And at that time, you can mess things up by saying something that you have no idea, or embarrassed when you're unable to answer something you should be able to answer. One person went recently as a Muslim, and the first question they asked him was, why did the Prophet marry a 9-year-old girl? And he couldn't answer. And it became very embarrassing. There is an answer, but be prepared that you might, be asked something. And if you're going to that gathering as a Muslim, then you are an ambassador and you need to be able to answer. So he told me later on that it became very embarrassing for him there to be, and they felt somehow vindicated by their question. So for that, maybe baby steps, but at least we can start with becoming a little bit wider in our view than just a Khoja mosque. I remember that this is something that is slightly amusing. I'll always remember it. A lady wrote to me that I am widowed and I would like to get married. Do you have somebody you can suggest? I have been widowed for 5 years. So I looked around, and she was an older lady. I looked around, and the name of a very good young man, actually a dentist by coincidence, like you, but Iraqi background. So I wrote to her the email. I said that there is this dentist. He also is widowed, a widower, and he's looking to get married. So she said to me, "Na man Iraqi na tikab tu man ishnashri khapeshe." Now, what does that tell you? I don't want an Iraqi, I want an Ithnashri. Means in her mindset, Khoja Shias are the only Ithnashris in the world. There is no other 12er in the world. And that is how insular our thinking was at one point. Thankfully, as I say, it is becoming a little bit open now. And
well, only little bit. I don't know how wide it is open, but this is exactly where the challenges of the members are, that we have to have our level of Islamic education, a level of how we can answer certain contemporaneous questions that the wider society may have upon us to educate us that, look, something of this nature, otherwise we'll remain insular and within the four walls of Imambara, thinking that we've got everything within those four walls. But the world out there, that kind of dunya, cool. That's the so our world is much more
part
beyond.
Of the problem, excuse me, part of the problem is that we get a false sense of our own knowledge when we've never been challenged. Exactly. And then suddenly a situation arises and we are asked a question and we realize that our faith is based on what we thought we understood. It's not wrong, but we don't know how to explain it now. And in this way, people get very confused. But when you are open and going out with others, you soon realize what are those areas of challenge and figure them out for yourself.
Yeah, no, on this note, Abbas, we have to come to an end of this really interesting conversation. Thank you very much. I have to say your contribution in making Quranic knowledge easily accessible and understandable is hugely welcomed by many in the community and beyond the community. Your latest work together with your dear wife, Marhum Abai, on compiling an English tafsir of the Quran under the series title Tafsir Tadabbur al-Quran is an excellent example of this. What is refreshing, however, is your commitment to Islamic scholarship and its role in our community in enhancing its depth of understanding, as well as varieties of opinion sincerely held by prominent scholars, because in your work, I hope this comes out as well. With these thoughts, we bid farewell till next time. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and your family. Amen.
Thank you very much. May He bless you as well, September, for this Awakening Project, alhamdulillah. I've heard several of them with great interest.
Well, may Allah bless all of us.